Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Behind the Scenes of JRock's Pop Culture Revolution. This is episode number 10, and man, wow, we're getting ready to roll out our very next episode of JRock's Pop Culture Revolution. And that's going to roll out as it always does tomorrow morning on Thursday, January 7th. If you can, excuse me. Man, I don't know what I'm thinking, but we are in a new month. Uh, okay, I'll tell you what I was thinking about, folks, is actually we got something special we're going to be talking about later on tonight. But actually, like I said, we're going to get ready to roll out episode number 30 of our J-Rock's Pop Culture Revolution tomorrow morning on May 7th, to be exact, folks, at 8 a.m., as we always do every Thursday with a new episode. And we're going to be talking all about one of my all-time favorite classic TV shows, and that, of course, is Laverne and Shirley that I'm talking about. And why we did an episode on Laverne and Shirley, there's so many reasons, but man, I just realized that in the year 2026 marks the 50th anniversary since that classic TV show first premiered on ABC. And so you tune into tomorrow's episode at 8 a.m., you're going to find out all about Laverne and Shirley, if you don't already know it. Of course, Laverne and Shirley has a little something in common with our little show we're doing tonight, in that it was a spinoff show of Happy Days. No, we're not a spinoff show of Happy Days, but we're a spinoff show of another show, which of course is JRock's Pop Culture Revolution. So I got to thinking about of course, being that Laverne and Shirley is a spinoff of Happy Days. Happy Days, of course, preceded Laverne and Shirley. And if there had never been a Happy Days, there might not have ever been a Laverne and Shirley. And of course, the man behind the creative mind and writer and the main man behind both shows is Gary Marshall. And Gary Marshall had I don't know if he had he probably had a lot to do with it, but his younger sister Penny Marshall, who was an up and coming actress at the time, she she got her first, like, really, this was her really kind of breakout role. Prior to appearing on Laverne and Shirley, Penny Marshall had been seen on another Gary Marshall production. Of course, that was a classic 1970s TV version of The Odd Couple. If anybody knows anything about the history of The Odd Couple, of course, was in a movie that originally, starred Walter Matthau and Jack Lemmon. Okay, and so years later, they did a TV version in the 1970s, and Gary Marshall was at the helm of that, and it's just kind of amazing, the connections here. But Gary Marshall is also very much an involved creative guy. He was very involved with the writing, the casting, and everything in all these shows now. Sadly, I realize that, like I said, this year marks the 50th anniversary of Laverne and Shirley. And so I thought the show deserved to kind of have an episode and for us to talk about it and why it's so special. And so, I don't want to talk too much about it because you're going to be watching our next episode that rolls out tomorrow at 8 a.m. But I did want to say, Laverne and Shirley is also very special for the fact that, man, sadly, there's also, this is a sign that we're all getting older. Some of us are older than others, but the fact that pretty much the entire cast from Laverne and Shirley has passed away. There's only one remaining surviving living member of the Laverne and Shirley cast that still is alive today, and that, of course, is actor Michael McKean, who played the lovable idiot Lenny Kalinowski's Andrew Squigman's best friend. Now, Michael McKean and David L. Lander, who played Squiggy, they were writers on the show. They were They were a comedy duo actually years before they first met in college years before, and they did comedy together since their college days. Um, they created these two characters, Anthony, I think it was Anthony and Opie or something like that, but they changed their name to Lenny and Squiggy, and these guys were a big part of the show just as much as Penny Marshall and Cindy Williams, of course, who played Shirley Feeney. Um, this was one of the very first TV shows that really had a classic ensemble cast. Very much like what you think they did with Seinfeld in the 90s. I mean, they had a great chemistry. And then shows like Three's Company, Happy Days, all these great classic comedy TV sitcoms from back in the 1970s, 80s. They all the successful ones pretty much had a very successful ensemble cast. And of course, in talking about Laverne and Shirley, you had all the kind of side characters, but the two main stars of the show, of course, were Cindy Williams and Penny Marshall, starring as Laverne DeFazio and Shirley Feeney. These two crazy girls that had been best of friends, at least as far back as high school. Um, Laverne DeFazio, she's kind of the fun-spirited one, kind of the one that everybody thinks is, easy. Shirley's kind of a goody two-shoes, but her and Laverne are like the best of friends. They kind of their differences, kind of is what brings them together. As they say, oftentimes opposites attract. As far as these two girls being friends, I think they have a lot in common, but they also have a lot of, Shirley Feeney is, again, she's a type of girl that's always kind of known for doing the right thing. Laverne gets in a little more trouble, and they balance each other out, if you will. Um, Shirley's always kind of about doing the right thing. Now, it's very interesting because when the very first episode when the girls appeared on Happy Days, before there was a Laverne and Shirley show, the chemistry these two girls had on screen, it was immediate. I mean, I think it had a lot to do with the fact that the girls were already real good friends in real life. So they had a connection, and so even appearing on the first episode of Happy Days that they appeared on, there was that immediate chemistry because they were good friends. They knew each other, um, and what I remember from the first time they appeared on Happy Days is Laverne and Shirley are a little older than the kids in Happy Days, not much, but like when they first when they first appear, they're going on a date with like Shirley is Richie Cunningham's date to the prom and that, um, and she's a little bit older. The folks come home and find their son Richie in the living room with a much what they think is a much older woman uh, for their son. She accidentally punches him out. She's like a real toughy of a girl, and then also when Laverne and Shirley first appear in that first episode of Happy Days, they show up at Arnold's, and Laverne's kind of a foul mouthed kind of type of girl, and she's telling Ralph and Potsy, "Hey, what are you looking at? What are you looking at? You want to punch in the mouth?" And then her and Shirley go in the bathroom and beat each other up and get in a fist fight. But then one thing leads to another, and that was the first time any of us ever saw Laverne and Shirley before there was a Laverne and Shirley show. And from what I understand from from that one appearance on Happy Days, there was immediate talk that hey, these girls need to have a show of their own, and so of course, being that they appeared on Happy Days, and the girls were apparently friends with the Fonz. He was the one that kind of introduced them to Richie, and as they say, the rest is history. So they were actually connected with the Fonz, and it's just kind of interesting just from that one appearance. And so, of course, when they get their own show, being that they appeared on Happy Days, that takes place in the 1950s, Milwaukee, Laverne and Shirley have to be based in, 1950s Milwaukee because that is the era of Happy Days, and that is where we first saw them. And so, of course, with that all being the case, um, apparently Milwaukee was, I don't know if it still is, but at that time, in the 1950s, it was very well known for, making beer. That was kind of an industry in Milwaukee. So the two girls on the show, they worked as bottle cappers at the local brewery. And so that was kind of another aspect of the show. Um, and then you had all the side characters, like I said. And what's interesting is that, of course, the show is called Laverne and Shirley. So it very much did center around the two girls um, and all their antics. Now, Laverne and Shirley was also, because of not just Gary Marshall, the other um, producers and writers that wrote the shows, um, the show was very based on like slapstick comedy, physical comedy. Um, Cindy Williams and Penny Marshall oftentimes would do their own stunts, and sometimes it got really physical and out of hand to the point where the girls suffered minor injuries. But I guess they believed in kind of just, like I said, doing their own stunts and doing everything their own. And getting physical was a big part of the show. And from what I understand, it was one of the things they enjoyed most about doing the show. Now, again, being that it's called Laverne and Shirley, um, it's amazing because while the show was centered around the two girls, the other cast members were just as important. You had Carmine, the big ragu. I believe Carmine was supposed to be Italian, and he was Shirley's on again, off again boyfriend. They apparently been going with each other since high school, and her and Laverne and Carmine, I guess, all met in high school, and Lenny and Squiggy, and they all eventually move into the same Milwaukee apartment, and Lenny and Squiggy are their neighbors. I think eventually Carmine moves into the building. And Carmine was interesting because in the 1970s, there was this thing about they still have this, but it's not as strict. They had what was called standards and practices for TV shows where you could say you were allowed to say certain things on TV. There are other things you weren't allowed to say, and so back in the 1970s, you could not have somebody talk about making out with somebody or saying like you made love to somebody. That was not allowed to be said on TV. Now there were great creative ways producers and writers would get around that. And one of the ways in Laverne and Shirley they got around that was whenever Laverne or Shirley would be talking about going out on a date or making out with a guy, they would be talking kind of in code like, "Oh, Cheryl, you did voti do do. I did not voti do do do." So that was like another way of them saying, yes, I did make out with the guy, or no, I didn't make out with the guy, without saying it. It became a funny thing because even though I was a young kid at the time, I was able to pick up on what they were talking about. I knew that they made out with somebody or kissed somebody or had sex with somebody, but they couldn't say it on TV. Okay, and another thing with Carmine being her on again, off again boyfriend, because like, apparently, Carmine would call Shirley his angel face, and that, and it was obvious he was crazy about her. Um, but from time to time, she'd also go out on dates with other men. And so they had this on again, off again thing. And again, Shirley was a type of, I guess she believed, again, this was 1970s television, and certain things you weren't allowed to talk about on TV. I mean, even to the point of going back to the Brady Bunch. I mean, if you know anything about the concept of the Brady Bunch. Okay, it's where Mike Brady and Carol Martin get together. He's a widower, and she's apparently been married before, but got a divorce, and now except for the first episode, there's no mention of that Mr. Brady's, except for one time in the first episode where Bobby gets out a picture of his late mother, and Dad says, "Hey, Bob, what's this? You don't have to hide the picture of your mom. You can have it out there on the table if you want. I don't want you ever to forget your mom." Funny enough, though, once they become a big happy Brady Bunch family, um, there's never mention that Mike Brady was ever married before, and all through the history of the Brady Bunch show, uh, there's really not a mention that Carol Brady was ever married before. It's maybe brought up one time, and I think that was it. Because even, and I heard the Brady Bunch creator producer Schwartz talk about this in an interview a few years before he passed away. He's talking about, yeah, he goes, in the 1970s, nobody wanted to talk about the divorce. Divorce was a nasty word. It was a D word, and it's something people didn't like to talk about. Something was starting to happen, and he said that's one of the reasons I wrote created the Brady Bunch. I read an article about how there were becoming more and more divorced families. It was becoming more and more of a thing, and so again, that's kind of what the Brady Bunch is based on, but it only got mentioned one time, and it's just because, like I said, in the 1970s, there's certain things are not supposed to be talked about on TV. That was just kind of what the world was like back then, and I think they've got a lot more looser with what you can talk about on TV these days. But getting back to Laverne and Shirley, again, there were just certain things that you could or couldn't do, and so another kind of joke with her on again, off again boyfriend Carmine was he was crazy about her, and again, Shirley believed in all this stuff like you save yourself till you get married. You don't have sex until you find the right guy and you marry him. Um, that was kind of, and Carmine was always trying to get with Shirley, and it was still on again, off again joke throughout the history of Laverne and Shirley that every time Carmine would get turned on, or he gets sexually frustrated because Shirley was always telling him no, he'd have to go and take a cold shower. That became kind of a regular joke throughout, as Laverne and Shirley progressed through the years. It became an ongoing kind of theme or thing throughout that Carmine was always being told no. And then you had the two guys, Lenny and Squiggy, who they're kind of the male equivalent of Laverne and Shirley. These two guys, they really got you don't really hear them talk much about their family, or they don't have any family. So these two guys are pretty much best friends, brothers. They were close. They do everything together. They're the male version, I think, of Laverne and Shirley, if you will. At one point, Lenny and Squiggy became so popular that there was talk of giving them a series of their own, and I think they made a pilot, but they just couldn't really figure out how to do it. It just didn't end up working out. So they stuck with Laverne and Shirley. I think they made the right decision because again, all the actors on Laverne and Shirley, I think they had great chemistry together. They were really great. And the original Laverne and Shirley, all the years that they were in Milwaukee, I think that was the best time of the show. They did try to move the cast to. Oh, they didn't try. They in 1980 they made the big bold decision. Okay, we're gonna change the show up a little. We're gonna try to spice it up because at that point the ratings were dropping. We're gonna move the girls to California. They're gonna get out of their. They're no longer gonna be working at a brewery. They're living in the 1960s now. They're gonna move to Hollywood. We're gonna find them other types of jobs. They're gonna have all kinds of adventures in Hollywood. We're gonna maybe try to get them into trying to become movie stars or something like that, and 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 just it wasn't as good as when they were in Milwaukee. And what eventually ended up happening is um, Cindy Williams would leave the show. They would continue to call it Laverne and Shirley when there was no more Shirley, and and once they knew she was leaving, they didn't even kind of the way they the way they kind of ended her storyline. It was just kind of real quick, and I thought they could have done a much better job of maybe having a. They knew she was going to leave. They could have rented her out, or they gave her a going away party or so. That's not what happened, sadly. And so once Cindy Williams left the show, nothing against the other actors, but you call the show Laverne and Shirley. There's no Shirley. Come on, the show has no other choice but to fail. And then eventually, a few of the other cast members left the show. Betty Garrett, who played the nosy landlady Edna Garrett, she left. And so all of a sudden, she just, her character of Edna Babish just kind of up and leaves Frank DeFazio for no apparent reason. He's on his own. Laverne's now on her own. And again, I think the fact that they continued to call it Laverne and Shirley when there was no Shirley, um, it prevented them from doing like what Three's Company was able to do when the actresses would leave. In Three's Company was very easy. They could just, get another roommate. Well, having a show called Laverne and Shirley, where Shirley is no longer in the show, I mean, it just kind of makes it hard um, to get another roommate because again, how are you going to have a new roommate? And but yeah, the show's going to continue to be called Laverne and Shirley. I think even they realized that wasn't going to work. Um, there was an attempt in one of the episodes when Cindy Williams left for Laverne to get a roommate, but I think that's one of the things that became quite apparent that you can't have another roommate when the show's called Laverne and Shirley. It just isn't going to work. And and then so by the end of the final season, um, Michael McKean was had left the show, and I think he left the show at that point because he'd been offered to make the movie Spinal Tap, and so he went to do that, and he's remained a very successful actor all these years later. In fact, um, just last year they released the second Spinal Tap movie after 30 years, man. I gotta tell you, it's just as good as the first one. If you haven't seen the new Spinal Tap, want to go out and get that. Michael McKean, he's a great actor. But what also happened is, so once he left the show, there was no more Laverne and Shirley. There's no more Lenny and Squiggy. And the thing that I didn't like when Michael McKean left is there was just like there wasn't even any real mention. They didn't do anything to write him out. Sometimes it was just, but in the opening credits, you seen like they took him out of opening credits and it would just said, starring David L. Lander, as Squiggy. But there was no mention that Lenny had moved away or anything. Just he all of a sudden wasn't in the show. But I had heard Michael McKean talk about the fact at that point he made the decision to leave Laverne and Shirley because he just thought it wasn't the show had lost some of the sparkle, and but after Cindy Williams left, it just wasn't the same show he felt. And I think many of the viewers felt that it just wasn't the same show. And I'll tell you guys now, if you noticed at the beginning of tonight's episode, I got a little tongue tied, and I'll tell you what. Because again, when I was talking about the date, which is May 7th tomorrow, when our new episode 30 is going to roll out on Laverne and Shirley episode. I said it was January 7th, but no, it's May 7th. The reason I said January, because I want to let you all know about this. This is Eve Plum from the Brady Bunch, who played Jan Brady. She came out with this book called Happiness Included, and I got it, and I'm reading part of a book, and I'm going to want to probably and eventually in next couple of months, do an episode on the Brady Bunch. The Brady Bunch is that's just a show, man. I just love growing up, like all these other shows we talk about, Laverne and Shirley and Happy Days, Three's Company. Um, the Brady Bunch show we have yet to do an episode on, and there's so much to talk about. I will say this in reference to the Brady Bunch. I always thought Mike Brady was such a cool dad. I mean, I always used to love watching. I think, oh man, why couldn't my dad be like that? I used to love like when he'd tell Greg Brady, catch him smoke. They caught Greg smoking or something, or doing something he shouldn't have been doing, and and Mike Brady would tell his son, "Well, son, as long as you know what you did was wrong, I think that's punishment enough." What a cool dad. Again, it was written for TV, in 1960s, 1970s. And so it was back in the day when at the end of a 30-minute weekly sitcom episode, we would get some type of moral that we're supposed to learn after watching this 30-minute episode. And again, so because I'm a fan of that, I went out and got this. I got this on Amazon. I haven't read the entire book. So we will talk about that at another day. But what I have read is it's kind of fun. And I've only got a couple pages into it, but I thought I'd read this to you guys because another cool thing about this book is Eve Plum gets Christopher Knight, who played her brother Peter Brady on the Brady Bunch, to write a forward. So I thought I'd just read a passage from that to give you an idea of what the book is like. It says, it was a very long time ago that Eve and I met. No doubt you saw it. Our introduction has been rerunning for over half a century. Just think about that, folks. The Brady Bunch has been playing in reruns for over 50 years. Wow, do I feel old? Wow, that's almost as long as I've been alive. Wow, what? We were all there to watch it. Well, okay. So he goes on to say, we were 10 years old kids in 1968 when we met in the middle, and our lives would be forever altered by the Brady Bunch. Isn't that true? I know my life was forever altered by the Brady Bunch. I mean, it's one of the shows I still love to this day. It's campy, it's corny, but man, that's one show I loved. The dad was cool. Who wasn't? What teenage boy wasn't in love with Florence Henderson? I tell you, and Greg Brady, he was just the coolest a guy. I mean, he was a cool cat. I wish I was. You know what I mean? And so he gave me something to kind of strive for. Okay. Okay, and it says, little did we know that we'd be lifelong friends. So again, that's just one passage out of this book, Happiness Included, by E. Plum, who played Jan Brady. And that is a little passage that Christopher Knight did in his foreword in the book. And I just want to tell everybody about it. We'll talk some more about it. But one of the cool things I was reading in here is she was talking about some of the questions she's always getting asked about from her time of being on the Brady Bunch. And she was talking about the fact, one of the things she always gets asked is, hey, whatever happened to Tiger the dog? And she said, well, it's just sadly part of life, but most dogs don't live, to be 50 years old. It's just not something that happens, but, that's the sad truth. So I hope you guys have enjoyed tonight's episode. This has been episode number 10 of Behind the Scenes of JRock's Pop Culture Revolution. Be sure you check out episode 30 of our latest episode of JRock's Pop Culture Revolution. It rolls out tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. on, that's right, folks, May 7th, 2026. And I am Jason JRock Houston. I hope you've enjoyed tonight's episode. I always do my best to entertain you. And you know what? I tell you guys one more thing before we wrap up tonight's episode. Next week we're gonna be premiering episode number 31, which will be on a classic, really classic a science fiction movie from the 1950s. I'm, of course, talking about them. So look forward to that, and we will see you here next week. Bye for now.